Welcome to Seek Reality. I'm Roberta Grimes, and I'm so delighted that you're with us today because my wonderful friends, our guests today, are two especially beloved friends of our Seek Reality family. And I think by now everyone knows their story, but I'll just go over it quickly because it's an amazing story. Mikey Morgan is a sixth level being that's right up close to the source level of what we call the afterlife. He last had lived on Earth in the 1600s, and he loves us so much. He so much wanted to help us now spiritually that he chose to take a voluntary 20-year lifetime that ended in 2007 on Earth so he could speak to us in the voice of a modern American 20-year-old. And he does speak in that voice now, even though he's a very exalted being. He answers our questions about the afterlife and the greater reality from the sixth level of the afterlife, the level which is, as I say, just below the source, through his mother of this most recent Earth lifetime, who is Carol Morgan, and she's our guest today, even though she insists to us that she never would have signed up for this. He says, "Oh, yes, Mom, yes, you did." She's shaking her head. So today our guests once again are Carol and Mikey Morgan, who are with us for the 25th time. I first met Carol just a few years after she had lost her son Mikey in an auto accident. Carol knew nothing about the afterlife at all, and she's never studied it deliberately. But I have tested Mikey's knowledge exhaustively, and I can vouch for the fact he is exactly who and what he claims to be. He's a very exalted being, amazingly enough, who has achieved the level of the afterlife that is almost the Godhead. I've spent more than 50 years researching the afterlife and the greater reality, and Mikey knows a lot more about all of these things than I do. His answers are always, you might say, dead on accurate. Sorry for that little pun. And when he often adds extra stuff to his answers, and those are also accurate. I've never seen him make a mistake in all the hundreds and hundreds of answers he has given on this program and also privately when I've been testing him. Mikey communicates with us now from much higher than he was when he first left there to come back and talk with us. He's gained so much more merit just from doing this for us. It's extraordinary what he's done. This is a wonderful gift that he is now giving to the world. It's a gift of service which is incomparable. I've actually heard of no other situation in which someone of his level of development has done something like this. So it's really beautiful. Carol and Mikey, welcome back. It's an honor to have you with us.
Thanks, Roberta. We're back here. I'm in the frozen tundra of the north, but everything's good otherwise. So we're doing good. So thanks for
So,
having us
so where
back.
are you exactly? You're in like Minnesota?
I'm in Wisconsin now, but I'm right on the border of Wisconsin and Minnesota, kind of along the St. Croix River. St. Croix River Valley, they call it. So
It's like
that's
in the
where
in
I'm
the
hanging out.
zeros there or something. It's very
Oh,
cold.
it's very cold. It was below zero, and the wind chill was this morning, I believe, almost 20 below. So it's very chilly here. Very
Oopsie,
chilly.
that's really chilly too. But you tell me that you and Mikey are going to be going to Florida pretty soon.
Well, I'll be going, and I'm sure he'll be with me, because he's always kind of always hovering right over here on this right shoulder. So I know when he's around. I call him in, to visit periodically for sure.
Well, one fortunate thing about being in this situation is that you do have the companionship of your son, even though he transitioned now quite a long time ago in '07, and we're recording this in almost 2025. So most mothers who would say that they had lost their son, 20 years ago are grieving, but you aren't grieving because he's still around you all the time.
Well,
So
he's
that
around, and I always try to tell other grieving people that I come across because I do end up meeting quite a few people because people refer people to me to talk and whatever, and I actually do like to do that, is that our loved ones, those connections never end. They tap into your loved ones because they are around. And I mean, the holidays are a tough time. Roberta, I still have my moments of where it's like, wow, I wish she was here physically, because you do miss that. You miss the physical because we're human. But I truly know that my relationship is just different. And once we can reach acceptance of that our relationship is still different, they're not gone by any stretch. So if we can reach that point and accept it, our life can be more pleasant, because grief is tough, and the holidays can be tough for a lot of people. That I do know. It's a tough time of year because it's a time to be with your loved ones, and they're not physically there, but trust me, they really are there.
They
They're
really
in
are there.
spirit.
And right now,
Yes, they are.
as we have this conversation, it is approaching Christmas time, and that's why we're sort of talking about the holidays. But let's talk just very briefly before we get to the questions about how you ask these questions. You basically talk to Mikey and say, Mikey, here's a question, and you hear his answer, right?
Right. So I still use my pendulum and my disc, Roberta. So I know I've showed this before.
Right.
I still absolutely use that. I've got the long question list from the person who had sent that in. And so I sit down, I do my whole ritual that I do with the pendulum, and I call for Mikey and I go ask for protection and everything. And I go through the list of questions and I get my answers. I use the pendulum. I mean, I watch the pendulum, but I actually hear him. But, I love watching the pendulum because it's just crazy how it moves. So I still do use that, but I hear him, and we can go pretty quickly because I do hear him telepathically as well. So, but I also confirm with the pendulum, just to be sure I'm hearing correctly. But I've really improved on my telepathic skills for sure with this.
And what has happened in this case is was someone who is very generous asked a whole bunch of questions, so we do have a little backlog, which is nice. But if you have questions and you want definitive answers about the afterlife, just send them to me at info@robertagrimes.com, and we will ask Mikey those questions. So on a future podcast, those questions will get answered by a true expert who lives in the afterlife. And there's even so some of these questions have been real teasers for me. He's always had a good answer that made sense to me, even though sometimes I have said, gee, that's a stumper for me. I'm not sure about it. His answers always have made perfect sense to me. Well, all right, let's get right to it. Here's the first question, Mikey. Okay. Can nuclear explosions that happen on Earth damage the astral world, which includes the afterlife? What does Mikey tell us?
Mikey says no. He says no, that this is a separate dimension, that the afterlife is the afterlife, and a nuclear explosion here is not going to affect the afterlife or these other dimensions. Again, everything is energy, and there's a lot of questions that are coming up too, and Mikey's going to get into more detail about this, but he says no, that what happens here, that type of a thing that happens here, absolutely does not affect the was it the astral, yes, the astral world, including the afterlife. He says no, it does not.
That would have been my guess too, because the material world, which is where we live, and material energy, which is what a nuclear explosion would probably not affect the astral. non-material world. I would have guessed that, but I wouldn't have known it for sure. So it's a comfort to know that it doesn't affect the afterlife. That's good. I like that. That's good. Thank you,
Right.
Mickey, for that
Yeah,
reassurance.
he just says no, that just would not. It certainly affects things here, of course, but not in the astral or afterlife dimensions. No, it does not affect that. So that's his answer on that one, Roberta.
All right. Well, thank you, Mikey. All right. Another one, and I'm not sure about this because I don't know a single thing about physics, but this guy apparently who asked these questions apparently does. He asks, is there a relationship between the levels of the afterlife and the 11 or so dimensions postulated by string theory, so that the higher the afterlife level, the more dimensions involved for beings at that level up to, say, level 7 beings being 11 dimensional beings? I don't understand that one, Mikey. I don't know if you do.
Well, so Roberta, when I looked at that question, I did, excuse me, I didn't even understand really the question, but
I don't
so what
either.
I did was I actually, and I normally I'm not one to do this, but I looked up what the string theory is because I never heard of such a thing. And so after I looked up what the string theory is, I read what the string theory is.
Uh-huh.
Then I asked Mikey the question. So, first of all, Mikey says the string theory, from his perspective, is not an accurate theory. It is not accurate. So
Oh, those
he
poor physicists, they're going in the wrong direction.
well, and it's I don't know if the strength, if you consider it like a hypothesis or what they're trying.
Yeah,
Anyway, again, Mikey talks about the afterlife and all the infinite dimensions that there are all based on energy, on vibration,
right.
which the string theory talks a little bit. There was a little bit of talk of vibration, but Mikey's thing is, you it's not linear. And I think, and if I even, well, and Mikey just says the theory is not accurate. So he just says it's not accurate in regards to the afterlife dimensions. He says it's just infinite, but it's all intermixed, but it's all in the same place. I mean, he's described this again. He goes back to the TV set where when we change the channel, something different shows up on that TV set. It's no different than all the infinite universes in the afterlife and everything. When you change the frequency, what you're experiencing is different, but it's not anything to do that's linear, and it's not, like levels.
It's not pile. It's not pile a pile of something. It doesn't.
Right. It's just all I mean, and my human brain can't comprehend this. And he says it's very hard to try to explain this in our way of thinking. But he always brings up the TV set where when you change a channel, every channel you experience something new on that TV, but it's all occurring in the same place. The show you're watching is all occurring on that same screen, and it has to do with frequency, but it's not linear or layered or anything like that. So, but anyhow, to make a long story short on this, he
Yeah.
says he does not agree with that theory. He
There's
does
not a
not agree.
relationship. In other words, the answer is no, there is not a relationship of that sort.
Correct. Right. There is not a
Yeah,
relationship between the two because the string theory is not accurate
right.
from his viewpoint or perspective.
Okay. All right. That's the answer then. Okay. All right. So then we're asking, are there an infinite number of universes?
Absolutely, there are.
Absolutely. I would have said infinite's a big number. And you're saying still there are an infinite number of universes. That's
Mikey tells me over and over, it just goes and goes and goes. It's infinite. It keeps it's just infinite. And I can't wrap my head around infinite
I can't
either.
either. That's a lot.
So, you know, we're in we're in a dimension where we're thinking it. I can't wrap my head around that, but he says there is an infinite number of universes. It just
I
goes
believe
and goes
you.
and goes. So that's what he tells me, that
I
yes,
believe
there is an
you.
infinite number.
I know there are a lot of universes. Infinite seems like quite a lot, but okay. I can deal with it. Um,
I don't know, and I don't know what infinite really, I mean, I when he says yes to that, he just says, Mom, it's beyond anything you can understand. It just goes. So, I mean, he's talking from his viewpoint and I'm talking from my viewpoint, and I just say, okay. I mean, he just says and honestly, Robert, I think that's in his book. I think he says that in his book about that it's infinite.
I think he may say something like that too. Yeah.
Yes. This is not the first time he said this to me.
And when we talk about Mikey's book, it's called Flying High in Spirit, a young snowboarder's account of his ride through heaven. It's a wonderful book, and he wrote it. We didn't write it. We just helped him get it published, basically. It's his book. So I can't possibly recommend it highly enough because it's 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 true. I can vouch for it, but we certainly didn't write it. Carol and I, we just helped him get it published. But that's another story. Okay, so then now that we have digested the fact that there's an infinite number of universes, Mikey, is this universe infinite in space and in time? What does he say to that?
Well, he says universes are infinite in space, but time only relates to this dimension. So
Oh, that was a
the
trick question, and he handled it well. He said, "Aha, you were trying to trick me, weren't you, you guys? You're being fresh, right?" He said that? Yep, we were
well,
being fresh.
the thing with this time thing, which I can't wrap my head around the time thing either, but he says time only pertains to this earthly dimension in regards to time here gives us order, sequence of events, and you have you know, before, during, and after, where in other dimensions, the afterlife, the astral, you're always in the present. So that's
This is so interesting. So let's spend a couple of minutes on this because this is hard for people living here in time to understand. And so we want to make sure we do understand it. When you are not in this material universe, when, for example, you travel, when you astral travel while your body sleeps, you are in a non-time place. Now, say again what Mikey says about a non-time place.
well, you're always in the present. You're in the present moment. So here, we have before, during, after, future. I mean, there's sequence
I
here,
mean, we
there's
can imagine a
order.
future, right?
Right, right. We can imagine a future. But
Okay.
in the other dimensions, you are always in the present moment. You are in the moment. And I mean, I have a hard time with this too. And when he first started with this with me years ago, when I first started doing this, I'm like, I don't understand what you're talking about. But, I'm getting a better idea of it. But this is really how they do signs and dreams and the communication that they do, because the fact that we are in order, everything's in order, or there's a sequence or whatever, that's how come they can plug in stuff at the prime time to give us a great sign, for a loved one. I mean, this is how they can do it. And he actually explains that in his book also about how they do that. But this is what he tells me, and it's always the same answer on the time thing. And so time only pertains to this earthly dimension, what we are in right now.
There, there actually is no such thing as time. Isn't that time is different? Is that it literally does not exist. And actually, I remember what it's like when I have been in the astral, and the difference, you get used to it pretty quickly, and time seems like an odd thing to have. Why would you want it when you're there? You don't even want it, but it is quite different. So that is very well said, Mikey, and thank you for that too. But that's kind of amazing. Okay. Um, but the universe is infinite in terms of space, he says. Space is something they still have, but it's not an encumbrance because travel happens by mind and it's instantaneous. You can go to the end of the universe in an instant. We're not encumbered by space, but it does exist there. Okay, well, so mine's having been completely boggled. Let's go to the next question. If there are multiple universes, and we've just learned that indeed there's an infinite number of universes, are there multiple afterlives? And is there still only one consciousness? Ooh, that's a good question. Okay.
So Mikey tells me the afterlife, it's one afterlife. Well, the afterlife is humongous, right? Okay, so I mean, it goes and goes and goes, but it's not like there's a bunch of different afterlives. It's the afterlife, but there's infinite dimensions and things to do there in
Yes.
this one afterlife. But he says it's one afterlife with infinite dimensions and awesome things to do in the one afterlife. And the consciousness, the one consciousness, he's looking at that word. When I went through the one, he's considering that the source,
Yes.
God, the
Yes.
collective, the
Yes.
unity of all, whatever word you want to use for this. He says there's only one of those also. It's major. He says you can't even comprehend the glory of this unity of the source God. But there's only one. He says there's not multiple gods or sources or unities. It's all one. We're all part of this. We're all part of the source or God or whatever, but it's one. He says there's not multiple sources. There is one ultimate source. And he says you cannot imagine the glory of this one ultimate source, collective, unity of absolute pure love, which is infinite, whatever word or whatever term you want to use for it. He says you just can't even imagine it, but it's one.
Yeah, and this is I think the hardest concept to wrap one's mind around really is God, because he's right. I mean, God is the source of all things. God is infinite in size, but also you, you in particular, are God's best beloved child. Now, how many people are there in the entire universe? A boggling number. But each person who can hear my voice or could theoretically hear my voice is God's best beloved child. I, I, I find all of these things are difficult for us who think in just unitary linear terms. We can't really understand that, and yet it's true. That's what's hard for us. And in our little single little earthly body to get, but it's still true.
I think, people think of God as a man
Yeah,
or a ruler. They put a human twist
yeah,
on
that's
on
right.
God. And Mikey says, "Oh my gosh, Mom, God is far greater,
That's right.
far more magnificent than any human mind can comprehend." And he goes, it's not a person. God is not a person, and God is certainly not a ruler who, you did this, you go over here, and you go. I
There's
mean, he
no
goes, it's
judgment in
just so
God.
not
No,
like that. No, there isn't. And he says a lot of people get hung up in the fact that God is a ruler or a person. And he says that that is simply so inaccurate of what God really is.
right. That's so true. And yet, despite the incredible grandeur of God, still God is able in particular to love you, you most of all. That's the part I can't get, and yet we are told repeatedly that that's true. So I find it very over. I find it hard and yet wonderful to imagine that God is both so infinitely great and able to love with such specificity. It's just it's just so difficult to imagine, but it's true. It's true. It's so beautifully, wonderfully, wonderfully true. Okay, that's I've got to write another blog post about that because I can't even make sense of it. And yet, whenever I try to, get my mind around it, again, my spirit guide tries to help me do it, and it's difficult, but it's true. Another question: are black holes entry points for different universes? That's interesting question. Are black holes entry points for different universes?
Mikey tells me no. He describes black holes as dense energy or vibration. So it's not that he disagrees that there are or are not black holes. That's how he describes black holes. But he says
Okay.
they are not entryways to different universes. I'm just looking here at that question again. So he says, as far as travel to different dimensions or universes, it has to do with how we resonate with our energy. So
Okay.
it's more, we're in our body now. We are attached to our body, well, by the silver cord, which is a
Right.
whole other subject. But when we are in our body, we are here. But when we leave our body and if we travel out and come back, if that silver cord stays intact, or if we do, ultimately our body dies and that silver cord severs and we leave our body, we can then go to different um, universes or dimensions or whatever,
Right.
and understand like the astral dimensions are, our communication dimensions as we travel to different things. It has to do with how we vibrate, our energy, and that's ultimately what it gives us the travel versus going through a hole. Like he says, that's not a portal to another dimension or universe.
Okay, so it's just a phenomenon of,
It's just a phenomenon. It's a pocket. He calls them pockets of dense energy or vibration. And yes, they do exist, but they are not portals or openings to other universes. He
okay,
says that occurs more with how we resonate with our energy, is that's how we travel,
okay,
especially when we're of the soul level.
all right, okay. Okay. All right. So another question. Has the human genome been seeded by extraterrestrial races? So that kind of means I guess, are we genetically either partially or entirely related to astral travel by other races, I
I,
guess.
I'm trying. He when I asked him this question, he said no. Our earthly shell is our physical earthly shell here. It's our vehicle that we use. Um, he says extraterrestrials are he talks about this quite a bit. We've talked about this before. I know are interdimensional travelers. They are not flying in from a place in this same vibrational dimension. And he has said this from day one when I first started communicating with them. He said, this is how they can appear and vanish literally within an instant is when they're traveling and they make their vibration compatible with this dimension, they appear. Then we can see them. And they appear solid and everything else because their energy now is compatible, resonating similar to this dimension. When they change their vibration, they can vanish. Then they no longer are compatible within this dimension and we can no longer see them. So that is literally how extraterrestrials appear within an instant and then ultimately can vanish within an instant. They are interdimensional travelers. So they are literally traveling, they're coming from a different dimension to this dimension. They are not flying in a spaceship from a planet in this same dimension. So he always tells me they're interdimensional travelers. As far as our human shell is our human shell.
And
As
it's not
far as
related to interdimensional beings.
no, he says no, not our shell, not our earthly shell is not. He's talking about our shell. Are
Right.
there interdimensional people here? Yeah, there could be absolutely. There's some
Yeah, yeah.
influence
We're
for
we're
sure. There's
told that
influence.
there are. See, so
Oh,
he got
there
that
are.
right again. Yeah.
Right. But he's talking about just the shell, just our
Yeah.
earthly shell, not the soul type within the shell, if you're
Yeah.
understanding what I'm trying to say.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, those interdimensional beings probably are wearing, in fact, an earthly type shell because that would be a good way to conceal themselves, um, and not look suspicious. Um, they're traveling among us. They're trying to make peace. They're trying to, pass among us, and not raise a fuss, not make people think they're strange. Although you may know some people who are very strange, and they may in fact not be not have been born here in the usual way. You don't know. But yeah, exactly. I would agree. I think from what I have read, heard, and seen, I believe that that's exactly the right answer. that they're genetically, the shell is always is entirely of the earth. But there are uh, interdimensional travelers who can make themselves visible and then quickly invisible again if they choose to do it just by aligning their vibration to ours and then making it no longer visible. Um, some of them have been killed, and they have in fact been those bodies have in fact been captured. And I don't know. Well, at some point we may have a president willing to show those bodies. I don't know.
That part I don't know. I just know he's, the shell is of the earth or
Yes,
of this dimension.
yes,
But other than that, it's there's definitely others. There's stuff. I mean, the extraterrestrial thing, Mikey says is real, but
yes, it's
it's
real.
interdimensional travel
That's right.
is what it is. Yeah.
He's always right, my dear. You have such
I
an
don't know.
interesting life.
I'm
You never
Roberta,
planned
I'm
this
just the
interesting.
messenger. I
Yeah,
have no way to know any of it. I don't know. All of
I
this
know.
is over my head for sure.
Yeah.
I'm just the messenger on this stuff. So
Well, he's
interesting
always,
questions though.
these are very interesting questions, a bit fanciful, some of them. Oh, my goodness. All right, so this is another question which I think is kind of interesting. Did God simply create life on Earth without the need for evolution? Now, there is some interesting evidence which suggests that that God created different creatures and didn't it life didn't evolve, little by little by little by little by little. There are a lot of cases where where giraffe simply happened, for example. And I mean other weird new kinds of animals happened. Punctuated equilibrium, I think is what they call it. You don't have much in the way of the beings in between. Uh, but you just simply see a new kind of animal appearing. So, what does he say about that? Did God simply create life on Earth without the need for evolution, or what happened? What's the
Well,
process here?
so God does create the life here or the shell here and again, Mikey always says that, we're of a different soul type than let's say an animal,
Right,
various animals or
clearly.
bugs or whatever. Okay. Um Everything's alive, but and the earth is alive, trees are alive, but we are of a different soul type. Now, I know there has been some evolution, right? We all know there's been some evolution. And Mikey says evolution is the concept that change. Okay, so the one constant in life, we always hear the expression, the one constant in life is change. Mikey says there is truth to that. There's always progression. And that's where the infinite part comes into play, Roberta, and it's the fact that he says there's always progression, there's always change. And obviously, people here, we always try to fight change, but he says there will always be change and progression. And that's no different than the spiritual world. There's always change and progression.
Really.
Mikey
That's
told me, he
right.
said, Mom, think about, he says, think about the telephone. He always, Mikey always loved the phone thing, and he said that think of how the phone continues to progress or evolve. He says the same is true with different things that have happened with earthly shells of different soul types. Now, not all things have evolved or progressed, but some things have. And he says there will always be components of change or progression. He says that's just how all dimensions are, actually. There will always be change and some progression, you know? And so that's where the infinite word, I think, comes into play with him too. And so some things don't need to evolve, but he said some things do need to evolve and
Sure.
have there be, excuse me, have there be progression. Even with the progression of medical here. I mean, think of how that has advanced. I mean, there's just always progression with everything. And change is going to happen. And Mikey says even though people fight change is always a constant. That is always going to be happening. That's just how it is.
Okay. Well, that makes sense to me. But but I think punctuated equilibrium is interesting because we will see a long period of stasis with many of the
Mm-hmm.
animals, and then all of a sudden we'll see oh, a new kind of animal in
Correct.
that
Yep.
chain. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's sort of how it happens. And I think we just, we need to accept that. And that's kind of what he's saying. That's just how the change happens. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
And we've once again come to the end of our time. My goodness, the time goes so fast when we're talking about this stuff. So, if if you have questions that you would like Mikey to answer, just send them to me through the green contact block on robertagrimes.com. They don't still have, Mikey and Carol still don't have their own website. So they kind of use mine and his book is there and you can find it on just on anywhere. You can order it through any bookstore or order it at Amazon or order it at Barnes and Noble. But I really recommend his book. His book is terrific, and it really was written, was really dictated actually by Mikey. He wrote it just the way he writes his answers, using a pendulum. That's true, right? The book was written using a
Right.
pendulum.
I asked him questions and he gave me the answers. I mean, and it was I ultimately, I was hearing things telepathically too when I did that book, but I would always confirm with the pendulum. The one chapter on the afterlife dimensions, I literally did that. That took me a long time to do because I just went over and over with the pendulum on that, on spelling of words and what he exactly meant, because I had no idea what he was talking about. I knew it was going to be published and I wanted it accurate. And so that is how
Took
it was
forever to
done.
do
That
that
is how it
book.
was done.
Yeah. And then I was sort of the editor, and so I wanted to make little changes. Every single one of them, she insisted, every change had to be vetted through Mikey. I couldn't have the last word on anything. It was a little bit frustrating, but that made it totally Mikey's book. It's his book cover to cover. So I can recommend it very highly. It's a terrific book. And one of the few written by a person who literally has already transitioned back to where he is now, which I think is kind of a nifty fact. But anyway, we'll have them back again soon. And we probably have another couple of programs worth of questions. But anyone with any questions, please don't hesitate to send them in. We'll have a lot of fun with them. And there you have it, my dear. And stay put so we can talk for a few minutes. She's heading off to Florida, which I think makes you kind of a sissy. I mean, you can't stay there all winter. I think you should stay there all winter, be a soldier. The fact that where Mikey is, it's always a perfect temperature. And I think Thomas is laughing at me about that. He thinks I'm pretty silly, but then he always has. I mean, I
Yeah,
see,
no, I like to get out of here. It's too chilly.
I
It's
think we
chilly.
both have someone who looks over our shoulder and, enjoys what we're doing, but then really thinks they both think art, but we're silly, which I think is pretty funny. Oh Lord. But anyway, this has been a lot of fun. I always enjoy talking with you and talking with Mikey. But my dear friends, please, once again, this has been Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes, and I'm just very happy you could be with us today and be part of this conversation. Please never forget that you are a powerful eternal being. You never began and you never will end, and that's true. This is how time works. If you are alive right now, you always have been and you always will be. That's just a fact. And when you get what that means, it changes everything in your life for the better. Next week, our guest is planned to be Scott Grace, and he wrote a wonderful book which really caught my attention. It's called Mindful Masculinity, and it's time it became mindful, I would think. But but I was just away and I just came back and we still don't have his book. So if we don't have it within a few days, we're going to have a different guest. And I'm sorry about that, but eventually we'll have him with us. But either way, we'll have someone wonderful. So please be sure to join us next week. And of course, this week we've been visiting with Carol and Mikey. And Mikey is, in fact, a genuine sixth-level being from the level just below the source. And he last was on Earth before this time in the 1600s. And he came back just to teach us. That was considered to be such a sacrifice that it gave him really tremendous, we don't call them brownie points there, I don't think, but whatever they are, it gave him such an advantage there that now he is almost exactly at the level of the source, but still he stays where he is just in order to be able to teach us and to love us from there. So Mikey truly is an extraordinary human being. He'll be back again soon to answer more of our questions. And as you know, our great friend Craig Hogan is the president and guru of Seek Reality Online. And so go to seekreality.com and learn from there what it's like, which is beyond what you can imagine in terms of wonders, what it's like in the afterlife. Because if you are alive now, you are always going to be alive. And so you may as well learn in advance what it's like there. So you'll have a little sort of jumpstart on the truth of what comes next, which, as I say, is truly amazing. And of course, teachingsbyjesus.com is your best resource for the beautiful divine truths that are brought to us in perfect love by the greatest teacher of them all, Master Jesus. The reality is that the religion we have now, which we call Christianity, didn't come from Jesus, believe it or not. It came from the Roman Emperor Constantine. As that religion dies, Jesus finally can be here with us to teach the truth. And that all is beginning to happen now. I'm going to, before long, do a podcast about it so you can better understand the truth of what truly is going on now. And that is the greatest gift that I can imagine. Jesus is finally going to be able to teach us his truth and not Constantine's truth. And as you know, I have some nonfiction books that are available, but not time to talk about them. They're all though talked about on my website. And if you want to talk about anything at all, you can always contact me through that green contact block on robertagrimes.com. I do answer emails, but I get so many that it can take a week or two to get them all answered. And of all of the more than 550 past episodes of Seek Reality are available wherever audio podcasts can be found, and the newer video episodes are available on Roku, Fire Stick, YouTube, and elsewhere. And meanwhile, this has been Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. Please enjoy and make the most of this coming week in our one reality, always knowing that you are a powerful, eternal being, and you, most of all in this entire universe, you are infinitely, eternally, and perfectly loved.